Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, the pandemic has now been raging for roughly 20 months. That's more than a year and a half of lockdowns, mask mandates, social distancing, delayed holidays and birthdays, working from home, and of course, school closures and virtual learning, all the fun that was. Not everyone has to deal with all of those mitigation policies, of course, and not all of those mitigation policies have been in place at the same time. If you live in Florida or Texas, where local government is more likely to prohibit COVID mitigation than to require it, your experience is very different from California or New York or Washington, D.C., where many people still wear masks outdoors, even though the CDC stopped recommending that measure a very long time ago. Throughout the pandemic, one silver lining has been that young people are not nearly as affected by COVID-19 as older Americans. In fact, only about 500 Americans under the age of 18 have died from the coronavirus, and most of them had pre-existing health conditions. As New York Magazine reported in September, we continue to underestimate COVID's age discrimination. To quote David Wallace Wells, after 18 months of public health guidance promoting universal vigilance, I think hardly any American has a clear view of just how dramatic these differentials are. All else being equal, an unvaccinated 66-year-old is about 30 times more likely to die, given a confirmed case, than an unvaccinated 36-year-old, and someone over 85 is over 10,000 times more at risk of dying than a child under 10. And although many infections still go undetected, your chances of dying from a confirmed case roughly double with every 5 to 8 years of age, as countless data across multiple countries demonstrated last year, an effect larger than even the most significant comorbidities. That's all from New York Magazine. There's no other way to put it. Children are extremely protected from COVID, more protected even than the vaccinated. So here's a question I have. Why are children still suffering under the tyranny of the very harshest pandemic restrictions of all in the entire country? In blue cities like New York City and D.C., school children are generally masked. When they have to eat lunch, they do so outdoors, even though it's been pretty freezing cold for the past several days. A week ago, the journalist Carol Markowitz tweeted, "It's 37 degrees in New York City today, and kids at public schools around the city are still eating lunch sitting on the ground outside. Grown-ups who enact these policies should try it." Michelle Goldberg, a liberal writer with the New York Times, said it was the same for her kids. "Not just on the ground, my third grader eats lunch at 10:45 to facilitate outdoor social distancing, with no snacks allowed all day." But having to eat lunch outside in the cold is a punishment that only kids have to put up with. When I go to Chipotle or Sweet Green or Panera for lunch, I eat indoors. Some of these places want you to wear a mask until you're literally eating, but now that DC's mask mandate is over, they don't exactly force you. I eat in much more comfort under much less restriction than a 10-year-old, even though I'm at slightly greater risk of having a negative COVID health outcome. And it's not just me, a working 50 or 60-year-old deals with far fewer COVID restrictions than school children, even though their COVID risk is significantly higher. We are bullying and oppressing the group of people who have the least to fear from COVID, and it doesn't make any sense. It's not just the masking and social distancing. Schools now shut down at random all the time. School districts are declaring more holidays. In Southfield, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit near where I grew up, where there are many school children, kids of color, less privileged students, the authorities there recently decided to make every Friday a virtual learning day, every Friday through December and January. Working parents are furious, but the district asserts this will help slow the spread. Come on. This is pointless. This is educators not wanting to actually do their jobs and using COVID as an excuse. Now, many people have wondered whether COVID mitigation is not only pointless, but also actively harmful for young kids. There's little doubt that learning loss and depression are real problems for this cohort, but we've largely been waiting for studies to bear this out. According to the Daily Mail, that study has finally arrived from Brown University, where a team of researchers supposedly found that young children's learning development had plummeted 23% due to pandemic mitigation. The Daily Mail specifically blamed masks, describing these mandates as possible culprits. The Daily Mail reported, quoting the study, masks worn in public settings and in schools or daycare settings may impact a range of early developing skills such as attachment, facial processing, and socio-emotional processing. Now, this study confirmed a lot of my own biases, so I went in for a closer look. And I actually came away fairly unpersuaded that we found the smoking gun. While kids did experience developmental losses, the study only looked at kids born during the pandemic. So in other words, this was largely a study of babies' developmental difficulties. Now, other people wearing masks might harm infants' social development, but masks generally have not been required for the babies themselves. Thank God. I also noticed that the Daily Mail hadn't actually gotten comment from the study's authors, so I emailed one of them, Sean Dione of Brown University. He told me that caution is the right way to approach this. Quoting him now, "Unfortunately, I did not speak with the writer from the Daily Mail, and I don't agree with the rather sensationalized headline that masks are doing harm to our kiddos. Indeed, we were not able to directly test whether the trends we observed were due to mask wearing or other potential environmental factors. The best we can say is that we are observing that children have reduced development relative to children we have tested previously. My personal thought is that it likely isn't masks because we are seeing the largest reduction in motor skills and early language skills, not skills we would associate with needing to read facial expressions or cues. I think only time will tell if we see prolonged effects or if this is transient and they recover or normalize as they get older, and if it impacts more mature skills like executive functions and social skills." While Dioni's reading of the study doesn't vindicate those who say that pandemic mitigation is actively harming children, so this is actually good news. We know that the pandemic has hurt our children, and the restrictions we are forcing on them are worse than pointless, but we don't yet have evidence that we've irreparably broken them. So loosen those restrictions, let kids be maskless and enjoy time with their friends in normal school and social environments. They can rebound. We'll see them rebound. Succumb to perpetual fear and force them into isolation, and they will languish. The choice is ours. So again, it's just so, it's the kids have the strictest mitigation efforts at all. Even so Randy Weingarten, the teachers union head, very, very involved in keeping mitigation efforts in place forever. She was at we have this tweet, if you can put it up. She was maskless at this event here. She took off her mask to talk, and then someone called her out on Twitter, and she was like, "Yeah, I probably should have been wearing a mask, but people were having trouble understanding me and communicating with me." Okay, maybe that's true of teachers and kids in classrooms too. Maybe it does inhibit. It doesn't make communication impossible, but maybe it makes it more difficult. And so this study, I saw the Daily Mail headline. I'm like, here we go. This is the study. And then I looked at it, and I'm like, oh, their write-up of this is very, very alarmist. So I talked to the author there, and he was like, yeah, let's hold off. But we don't need to prove that these things are harmful to stop doing them because they're pointless, and nobody else has to do them to this degree.
Yeah, shocking from the Daily Mail. They would exaggerate a little bit what they've got.
You can't believe it.
One of my daughters speaks very softly, and it's been hard for her in the classroom as a result. It's hard for the teacher to understand what it is what she's saying, and there's just no way that you can tell me that that's not somewhat harmful to her educational, intellectual development. I mean, it's just quite obvious that it is. Will she recover? Yes, I'm sure she will. She has. She's a two-parent household that with plenty of resources in a nice part of Washington, D.C., she's going to be fine. But that's not the case for 90% of kids. So now that so many kids are vaccinated and that teachers are vaccinated and parents are vaccinated, any argument you could have made before just goes out the window.
Yeah. No, it's the same. I have
especially as we come into winter. Like sending kids out to eat in the snow and the cold. Yeah,
that's crazy. It's truly crazy. Or the kids who have to they're playing sports, outdoor sports in masks. I ran track and cross country in high school. It was hard enough to breathe doing that. You're going to put these kids in masks. Again, not for just one season, but now for 3 full semesters of their school experience. At least it has to end for them.
Right.
We have to let it end for them. Yeah. But you worry that the authorities will just say they're so risk averse. But again, they're more risk averse on behalf of kids who are safer from COVID than old people. So it makes sense.
Right. And they make the argument that it's because they're going to spread it to people at home. But if the people at home are vaccinated, then that argument falls apart.
And they can continue to take extra cautions if they want. If people more at risk want to continue wearing masks, fine. Yeah. But that we can't make that argument for the kids.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to what's on your radar coming up next.